Karen Hiller.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it is 10 o'clock on, let's see, Wednesday, July 15th. This is the second meeting this month of the Social Services Grants Committee of the Topeka City Council. And we are meeting today in particular to do appeals on our social services grant process. We have a split of attendees, both in person here at the Law Enforcement Center as well as virtually. Just so people know who is here, let's go ahead and introduce the committee and the staff, and then just quickly identify in the room and on the screen so people know who's here. I'm Karen Hiller. I'm the chair and I represent District 1, Council District 1.
Mike Padilla. I represent District 5.
Christina.
Oops. Sorry, I muted you. You got muted somehow.
Unmute. Okay. Christina Valdivia Alcala, representing District 2.
Okay, let's go through those that are on screen and just represent yourself. Just introduce yourself and who you're with.
Looks like we got Kathy up first.
Okay. She'll call your name.
You're muted. Muted. Oh.
Okay.
We're on mute, Kath. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, Kathy Botalu at Senior Center.
Okay, next we have Linda. Oh, you're muted. Everybody's muted.
I can go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Susan Madison for Peace and Justice.
Oh, Linda?
Thank you. I'm Glenda Du Bois. I'm the Executive Director of the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Ethanol?
Edie.
Yes.
Edie.
Edie.
Edie Sneeden with the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Debbie Lake.
Debbie Lake with Mountain Signing Senior Center.
We got Francis here.
I'm Frances A. Gray with Athens Landing Senior Center board member.
Karen Streeter.
Good morning, I'm Karen. I'm the Vice President of Development at SLI.
Barbara. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Barbara Valentine with the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Jessica.
I'm here with Bay of Greater Topeka.
Juliet.
Juliet McDiffett with United Way of Greater Topeka.
Shelley Robertson.
Robertson, Development Director, Topeka Salvation Army.
That was Shelley from the Salvation Army.
Natalie.
Natalie Squire with Catholic Charities.
Brett.
Mark with United Way of Greater Topeka.
Lindsay Anderson.
Lindsay Anderson, Director of Programs, Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Then we have K.H. Edwards.
Carla.
Carla.
Hi, it's Carla Heck with Self Access.
Danny.
I'm Danny De Leon, Grants Manager with Catholic Charities of Marcus, Kansas.
The Saudis.
Yes, Lou Sadi with the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Nikki.
This is Nikki Ramirez Jennings. I serve as the Executive Director for SET Topeka.
Mike.
This is Mike Spatafor, Mobility Manager.
Susan Harris.
Susan Harris, the Executive Director for the Dayton Area Agency on Aging.
Don McWilliams.
Dominic Williams, Boys and Girls Clubs in Topeka.
Then we have City Manager.
City Manager Brent Trout, City of Topeka.
Kathleen Link. Looks like you're the last one.
Kathleen Link, Executive Director of Positive Connections.
And
We got a few people.
I'm Crystal Wiltz. I'm the board president for Sole Reason.
Okay.
Santa Clara, well, sole reason.
Okay.
Katie Gibbons, Breakthrough House Incorporated.
Stephen Robinson, Breakthrough House.
Could everybody hear on the Zoom? No?
It's breaking up a little bit, Karen. It's kind of
Okay.
choppy.
Well, they're in the back of the room, so we have Breakthrough and Sole Reason in the back of the room. We'll get you all in the future, if you're going to speak, to come to the podium so that everybody's got the mic. And then we have staff here.
Rochelle Vega Bertana, Neighborhood Relations.
Corey Wright, Housing Services.
Okay. We've got Liz in the back from council office. Thank you, Liz, for all the setup. All right. Our agenda today, we've got minutes to approve if people are ready, and then the appeals process and setting the next meeting. Item number 2 then is approval of minutes from July 8th. That was only a week ago. They just came out. Committee members, have you had a chance to review? Because if you have, then we can go through them today. Otherwise, we could wait until our next meeting.
I haven't had a chance.
Mike has not. Christina?
I just did a really quick glance. I mean, quick.
Well, let's go ahead and hold off and approve them at our next meeting so we've got time to get through them. With that, let's advance to the agency appeals. We have 6 agencies that have appealed. The expectation is that we will go through them in order. I'm going to lay out some ground rules. I have not made these arrangements with the committee in advance. So committee members, we've got the choice of, traditionally the committees do make the decision immediately about the appeals. We do have in our ground rules that if we need some time, we have a commitment that we would make a decision within 7 days, but we can give ourselves some time if we need to do some thinking or some research. I think, and Corey, I'll lean to you as well, that typically the committee hears the appeal and decides immediately rather than returning to them at the end of the list and going back through them. Is that right?
That is how it's been in the past, yes.
All right. So what we will do is I will lay out the ground rules. We will have each agency come up one at a time. We will then discuss with them back and forth whatever questions we have. And then the committee will discuss amongst themselves to make a decision about whether, about the status of that appeal, and then we'll go to the next. Does that sound all right? Christina?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so my question is then, we're going to listen to each appeal. And so let's say we listen to Catholic Charities first, and then you and I might discuss this, and then we're going to make the decision this morning, correct?
If possible, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The ground rules are that, and I think all of the agencies are clear on that, the appeal is based only on the scoring. And so the letters varied a little bit in terms of how clear that was, what they wanted to approach, but I was able to figure out pretty much all of them. The issue then is that the appeal is based on challenging a score. And so the agency needs to focus on that and explain to us why the score would not be correct based on the application. This is a process where it's based on the application itself and the scoring through our vendor and through the expert team that they put together to do the grant reviews. So we will look to those appeal letters, ask people to clarify what their position is. We, as a committee, have seen the scores. We've got a master score sheet, but we have not seen the explanations that went to the agencies. And so it will be helpful to us to have the appellant explain which item they're looking at and what their concern was, what the explanation was, and then make their case for why that should be changed. If we need some help from the vendor staff to explain a little more, we will ask them for help. They are here. They are the United Way folks that are on the Zoom. We will then do so the only reason for a change would be an undeniable flaw in the way we asked a question or the way that the expert team made the score.
Karen?
Yes.
Karen, thank you. I just want to say, please bear with me in this process. This is a process I take very seriously, but this is the first time I've ever done anything of this nature. So I would ask Karen to please, help guide a little bit on this for the newbie on the committee. I have gone over everything, but I know that this is all new, so thank you.
And just to thank you very much, and each year the committee has new members, and so the council wanted this process to go through the council itself, and so each year we do our best, and really people have been pleased with the process so far. The reports on how the application process went were good. This is our first time to use this new vendor, so sometimes it's rare to have an appeal granted, but we always want to go through that process, and it also helps us learn about the process and the clarity each year. For those who aren't familiar with that, once this process is totally over and the allocations are finalized, this very same committee will meet this fall to review the process, the questions, everything, to make recommendations for how it should go next year. So we always learn from all of you as well about how the process is going. Questions then? If not, let's start, and Catholic Charities is our first appellant. And so we have Catholic Charities online, correct?
Yes, good morning. My name is Danny DeLeo, and I'm a grants manager, and then I'm here with Natalie Spar as well.
Okay.
So would you like me to give a recap of what we're appealing?
Please. You're on.
Okay, sorry. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for having us out today. The part of the application that we're looking at appealing, we received 0 out of 20 points on the section. Applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes on prior grants per meaningful measures. And the comment for that section was that the current grant is a 2020 grant, and we have quarterly reporting, not full year reporting, so achievement cannot be listed. I did ask for clarification on that. So the 2020 Topeka SSCS grant has not yet been dispersed. The funds are still being held up with HUD, so we don't have a contract yet for that. So when I asked for clarification, they said they looked back at our 2018 outcomes, and there were some discrepancies in that reporting, and I had explained that when I completed the reporting last year and in the description section. So I pointed that out in our appeal. I highlighted that part in yellow under each comment section as to where the discrepancy was on our part. There was some turnover at our agency, and I think some previous confusion about whether we were reporting on specific people served solely with this grant or at our entire center. And so that is something in this application that I was very cognizant of, and really tried to outline how we were focusing on people served solely with this grant. And so then on the previous report from 2018, I put what the numbers should be, and the correct numbers were reported on the demographics as far as the people that we served. So there was some misunderstanding on our part, and I apologize for that. And so that's why going forward on this new application, we were really purposeful with how we define those numbers very clearly. So basically, we feel like 0 out of 20, we did meet the outcomes, even if it wasn't properly reflected, and that's what we were trying to show. So we asked that you would consider it.
Thank you. Corey, I'm going to lean on you a little bit here. In the past, past years, the council has been faced with similar situations where an error was made and acknowledged because of staff turnover or whatever. In those cases, what has the committee decided?
Councilmember Hiller, in most cases, if we opened it up where somebody could correct their outputs and outcomes, then we would have every agency wanting to make a correction as well, so that we have not ever allowed that to happen during the appeal process, to my knowledge.
Thank you. A little point of order. Can everyone hear her? You're going to need to take off your mask or get closer to the mic.
That's fine, yeah. Okay. Would you like me to repeat?
I think so.
Okay. In the past, we have not allowed people to change their outputs and outcomes reporting during the appeal process, because that would open it up for all the applicants to appeal that same situation and want to change their score. So that's just the history, is we have not allowed that to happen during this process.
Thank you. It looks like that is the only issue that Catholic Charities had, was that particular score. So first out of the chute, I guess, the issue would be, given that track record and what Corey has explained, we just need to decide on this one whether we would allow an after-the-fact correction.
Madam Chair.
Councilman.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Corey, and or maybe to, where'd he go? Brett, there he is. Outcomes and output seems to be a struggle. Understanding, I guess, those definitions and how they're different. And this is just a comment, not about the score so much as when we've gone now to United Way, has there been some effort to make clear those definitions for the applicants? But I don't know that that's really her
That's not
issue
really
right
the
now.
issue here.
Is the score.
Uh-huh.
So I just want to make sure that that is covered somehow, but.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be a struggle with, from my time on the committee last year as well. But yeah, I understand what Corey is saying. I just wanted to make sure that we're doing everything we can during the application process, that people understand what needs to be done. Thank you.
And may I make one comment? I apologize, but when we submitted this report last year, I did write the correction in the explanation, because you can't go back to previous quarters. And I was very new, so I probably should have reached out to someone at the time, and I apologize. But I did justify it at that time that this is the amount of people we actually served, 169, even though it wasn't reflected in those EC impact numbers. So I did point it out at that time. So I just wanted to say that this isn't something that's just coming up in this appeal.
I might need a clarification. Is when the committee looked at those numbers, were those submitted by you or by the city in the application? Corey?
If I may.
Okay.
Yeah. What we did was give a copy of what their expected outputs and outcomes were, and then their final report for the year at hand. So the review committee looked at what they proposed and what they received at the end of the year and made the determination on the score.
So that document came from you all rather than from them?
It came from us, yes, but it's a report out of EC Impacts.
Right. And so if they had put the qualifier with that report or in that report, Did that go forward as well then?
Did they do that? We don't recall that going forward, no.
But you're saying it was filed with the report?
Yeah, so I don't know if you have a copy of the appeal I filed, or we sent in, but I put in what I had entered into EC Impact. So you'll see I don't know if you have a color copy, but the edits where it says projected actual quarter 1, quarter 2, then there's a section under each that says describe the data source and data collection method. And in that section is where I had mentioned that the numbers of those we actually had served with this grant and the numbers of those we'd served with the agency, because I wasn't able to go back and enter the report.
We have not seen this document until it was received in the appeal process. The corrections that she made.
So she's saying she submitted them, you're saying you didn't get them?
We did not receive this in this format. Yeah.
Yes, not in this format. So the document I printed directly from EC Impact, and I edited in the correct numbers, but then I also highlighted what I had submitted originally, what we had submitted originally in EC Impact. So the description, the highlighted piece, was the narrative where I said, please note 750 was based on the entire program, not just those helped with SOCS funding. And then I said, but 169 were helped directly with the funds during the year. So we did it verbally because we couldn't enter it into the actual orders because they had passed, and that was an error on our part.
You did it verbally, you said?
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I wrote it. I wrote it out here. I apologize.
And I'm not familiar enough with EC Impact. So you submitted that language with your report?
Yes, that was last fall, or like the end of summer last year.
So staff should be able to go back into EC Impact and find it?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Chair, thank you. Okay, I'm just having some problem following this thread here. Is what Catholic Charities stating is that they provided information that the city received, but then was not passed on to the United Way? I am confused.
I think that's what they're saying.
This is what you gave me.
No, I don't. I'm saying, so this is my first time, so I apologize. I did the application for the 2021 SSCS funds. When we received our score back was 0 out of 20, it mentioned that 2020 funds, because I said, oh, I don't understand why we scored this way, and it talked about 2020 funds, because the application just asked about 2019, 2020, and 2021. Well, our 2020 funds we haven't received yet, so we can't start administering them or reporting out of them yet at this time. So I received an email from Juliet saying, I think from Rochelle, saying that we were evaluated on our 2018 outcomes, which is our most recently concluded program year, because you all have to see that we're doing what we say we're doing with the funding, which we completely understand. And so when we look back at this 2018, which we reported out on last late summer, early fall, right when I started in this position, that's where, when I originally had completed it, I completed Q4, and I completed a narrative, that's what I meant to say, sorry, a narrative section explaining any discrepancies in the numbers and how many people we had actually served with the funds, because it wasn't being properly reflected in the little boxes on the actual quarters. So that was in the narrative section. And I just think, so when you print the report from EC Impact, it has all the outcomes, outputs, and the goals, and then there's also a narrative section. And so it was in there. So I don't know if it just wasn't noticed because you're looking at percentages. And so that's where, in the narrative, is where we had explained what was going on last fall. So this appeal where we're talking about it, we're not just bringing it up right here. We had explained it last fall.
Are you?
So, yes, I have in front of me what we submitted to United Way. Again, it was their proposed and their actual from EC Impact. It does have a paragraph of explanation, but doesn't really say change it to 64, 59, 46. It just explains that they were counting down here, counting a different number. I could show it to you if you'd like to see it.
Sure.
But the committee, the review committee did see that in the.
And yes, that's correct. Sorry, I didn't break it down by quarters in the narrative. I just did the overall.
And is this, I didn't print absolutely every page at home of what they turned in. Is this narrative here in what we were given?
That narrative, yes, actually it is.
Okay. So the narrative is to describe the data source and data collection method you will be using? No.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so it says the number in the report says projected 750, third quarter 59, fourth quarter 46, 405. Then in the narrative, it says from July 1 through June 30, 693 individuals were served. 100% of those individuals are screened and received additional information as appropriate. But that's all still based on the 750.
Yes.
And then it's,
It doesn't pull it down to, there's really no comment about pulling it down to exactly what they funded.
that it's in the second section where I mentioned the 169 who were served specifically with these funds. Under the
What Corey has given me is the copy of the report.
under the indicator about,
I've got the wrong page.
it goes in
Okay.
a different order every time I
Okay.
print it or edit it or something.
So on this one, the note says, please note was a projection based on the entire program, not just those helped with this specific SSCS funding. Altogether, 693 individuals received rental and utility assistance for that July to June year, a number very near the 750 projected, with 169 who were directly helped with these funds. 100% of these individuals maintained housing and utility connection for 30 days after receiving assistance. And what was the goal number for that grant year? Did you give us that?
Yeah, the goal number was 750 was the projection.
In the grant?
Oh, the actual written, yeah, because this number came from the actual written grant. And because I think the person who wrote the grant based it on all of our services at our site, all of our housing and utility services, instead of focusing just on the SSCS. And I understand, I mean, this is on us, and that's why I'm really trying to firm it up and understand and make sure we're being very clear with the outcomes that we're putting forth. And so going forward, we really have tightened that up, and I apologize for all this discrepancy in the past. And then for some reason, quarter 2 was never reported on, and quarter 3 was reported, but they only put the people served, not the people achieved, which messed up that percentage so much.
I'm looking back here. Because your score on your reporting was actually okay.
I don't know, sorry.
So even with you mentioning the 169, it didn't tie it, in that report, didn't tie it back to what your goal had been for that particular grant, right?
The goal was that 750, which is why I differentiated between, so we reached 693, but then when we're reporting out, I think whoever's reporting out was just reporting on SSCS instead of our whole agency, which is where there was some confusion on our end. And so that's why the numbers were so much lower than 750, because we didn't serve 750 with that grant. We only served 693 with all of our programs.
Well, this is a lesson that, again, I'll lean back to Corey on this, that a number of the agencies have learned, and Rochelle, is that when the contracts are executed, that's the time to make sure all those numbers are set in EC impact
Yes,
correctly, so that that reporting will tie.
that is correct. Yes.
So it sounds like the agency has figured that all out going forward, right?
We have, and that's
And
why.
you said that in your letter,
this is
too.
From, we've got it all figured out, but it's, we're trying to show you, because we've been able to do a lot of good with it, and we really appreciate all the support. And, again, I'm so sorry for any discrepancies. I wasn't here, so I don't know. But we have really focused on getting it figured out, making sure it's clear. You will see that in our new application that was just reviewed. We lay it out very, very clearly, how many people we're serving with this specific grant, so that when we report out, it is correct numbers.
Yeah, because you did quite well on it otherwise. Congratulations.
Well, it's because I was so confused when I came in, so I couldn't deal with this.
Karen?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So what we're looking at is that transition from one person doing the grant to another person doing the grant, and how that information was input into the database. Is that correct?
Well, it's both. It's how the contract got set up in the first place with the numbers, and then making sure that the reporting tied to whatever the outputs in that case were, outcomes and outputs.
I have a number of databases open, but I could not print everything out. How much were they short, Catholic Charities, on their request? Does anybody have that?
They scored,
On the money, how much was their award decrease?
I'm not sure what you mean. They scored 75 of 100, so they did not get a grant award. Their score was not high enough.
I got it. Thank you.
So there is some trail of that, but it still gets back to some incorrect numbers.
Karen,
Yes.
Chair again, since you've been around for a long time and have served on this committee, I'm sure, before, and seen the process, is any of what we're looking at having to do with going from the city to the third-party administrator? Or is what we're looking at based on, because my sense is what it's based on more is that there was confusion when they were filling out the grant, but you also say that it has something to do with the way the contract was laid out. So what's the path here? How do we go through this? Because obviously, if it's something that was filled out incorrectly, or they did not understand and they had the United Way to go to ask questions, then that would be something that we can't take into account to allow for an appeal, for okaying the appeal. So, but there's this other part that you're talking about. Am I correct?
Well, what we're doing is exploring the facts on this one. Bottom line is still the numbers didn't tie there. Help us out, Corey.
Yeah, so Councilmember Valdivia Alcala, I think the outputs and outcomes that we're looking at and that were evaluated by the review committee were from the 2018 to the 2019 grant year, which would have nothing to do with our transition from going from a city function to the United Way function, if that's what I'm hearing her question as. So yeah, that's what.
So if this had been looked at in a prior year, it still would have been considered an error in the application
Yes.
and would not have been successful on appeal.
Correct.
That was a strength of our system before, so what we've been working on is to maintain the things that were strong and consistent and then work on the tweaks. So if that's the way such a request would have been handled in the past, then that.
And with it being third-partied out to United Way, would United Way have been able to answer any questions or confusions that obviously were part of this process that Catholic Charities was having? If the questions were asked of United Way, they would have been able to address those. They were not asked for clarity. Is that correct? Anybody? Catholic Charities?
This is Natalie. I think the problem is that we don't know if they were initially asked because neither Danny and I were around for that 2018 application. So the former grant writer who's no longer with us who reported that, she was confused about how to project those outcomes. So she created a projection for the entire Topeka Family Support Center for all fund sources instead of just for this fund source. And we really don't know if she reached out and asked for clarity on that. Does that answer your question?
It kind of does, but I guess I would also ask, and believe me when I say I'm not trying to stir a pot here, I'm just trying to get clarity. Was there not any way for you to go to that person, and is there not notes in a file, or is there not a history that's documented that you would have been able to turn to? Obviously not, but I mean, no way to communicate with that person to see the way it went. Because that's a pretty 75. That's a low score, and you know you didn't get anything, so there was obviously some major issues going on here. Yeah, I'm not seeing if honestly, Chair, if I can't see, and you need to tell me, Karen, on this, if I can't see that it was something that either was lost in translation between how the city was doing this and communicating with our third party, or the third party didn't communicate with the grant applicant, if there was disregard in communications, between our third-party administrator, which I don't think there was, or the city, anything of that nature, that where we could really put, hey, this was our failure, this was our fault, something is really amiss here and we have to check on it, then I don't see how we can approve the appeal. Again, I look to you, Karen, for something I may be missing.
I think you're right. I think we need to.
Mike, co-counsel person, any thoughts? Are you seeing it? Are you seeing it in this way? Because I just can't see any other way with this, from what I can tell.
Well, I haven't been around as long as Karen. That always comes out, it doesn't sound good to me, but anyway. I think I have enough experience with this, though. I think working with staff last time I was on the committee, I am as determined to make sure that funds are distributed to those agencies who have shown the need and the way that they distribute those funds. But I am also a believer in what we've done and moving it to the United Way. And I'm looking at this, and I used to manage grants too when I was with the police department. And I know if I made a mistake and was in error for whatever reason, whether it was we transitioned from somebody managing to another person or made a mistake in those numbers, usually those appeals fell on deaf ears, because it's not just my job, but it's the job of the person who is in charge of the agency to review that application to make sure that it meets everything necessary for us to acquire the funds. So I'm at this juncture listening to the discussion, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. And focusing on what our task is here and not straying from that. It would be a recommendation of mine to not accept the appeal. But that's not a motion, it's just a recommendation.
You know what I'm thinking? It's a new experience every year. I think what we need to do is do either a vote or consensus and put a tentative decision on each one, and then when we finish the 6, we'll finalize that and finalize our recommendation. I'm also looking back here and realizing that for anybody who looked, one of the problems is that there was never apparently a substitute figure to work from in these outcomes. In this one, the 750 was the whole agency, but it doesn't look like there was ever a substitute figure for what the goal was for that particular program in order to then compare that 169 to it. And so that made it kind of hard to go back on. Not the current lady's fault, but there. What I'm hearing then is a consensus on this one that we cannot grant the appeal, but we really appreciate the feedback and the work that the new staff is doing to have this totally nailed. When an appeal is not granted, and if that means there isn't funding that year, I know that it's very traditional to reach out in that process and say, there's always next year. That would mean you'd miss a year, but you would certainly be eligible to come back the following year. I also did note on the side that you all will be managing some of the COVID money, and so that will provide some extra money this year and in 2021 for consumers. So that's a good thing. With that.
Thank you for listening and for your consideration. And we know the appeal process is very difficult, but it was important to us to explain to you kind of what happened and where we're going, and that we get it and we're on it, and we want to be a part of this process going forward with the city. So we appreciate your consideration. Yes, we will be back next year, and with tight numbers and tight understanding, and we're living and learning, and we just appreciate your support, and we're just so grateful to be a part of the Topeka community and to be serving people every day. That's really the greatest gift. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you so much. This is hard. I don't know who it's harder for, us or you. Anyway, Salvation Army is next. I think we've got Shelley online.
Okay.
Shelley?
Karen, where do you start? Can you hear me?
No.
Barely.
Karen, really? It says unmuted. It's at 100% on my audio. Can you hear me at all?
A little. If that's the best we can do, we'll go with it. Can you help us at all?
All right.
Taylor?
Start first?
We're working a little bit to see if we can improve the audio from this end.
All right. I don't know what more. I'm looking at my little icon down here, and it shows the little microphone only at a half. But when I click on the arrow, I don't know what some of the terms mean, so it's not really clear.
Hang on just a second.
All right.
She's checking in the back. See if we can boost you.
Shelley, do you have your camera on too? Shelley?
Yes, I can hear you, Mike. I don't know how to get my camera to come on.
Well, if you're on Zoom, down in the left-hand corner, there'll be a little camera icon. And if there's a red line through it, that means your camera's turned off. But it doesn't look like it's completely turned off. Maybe you have something blocking your camera lens, because I can see something.
No, when I go onto that little camera, if I click on it, then it puts a red flash through it.
Oh.
Well, we're just going to go audio today. Often you get a pop-up before you get into that full screen that asks you if you want to activate your video, but this will be good. Let's go.
Okay, so there were a couple of things that Captain Lopez had asked that we appealed. So one of them was, how do we measure rapid? I was looking at our score sheet. First of all, one of the issues I did not address on our letter was no prior grant history with the city of Topeka. We have had we had 2 or 3 prior CDBG grants with the city of Topeka. So I don't know if because it's been 3 years, we are considered new, or what the perimeters are there for them to say that we did not. I don't know how far back they went.
Shelley, let's stop just for a second, because it appeared to me on the spreadsheet that maybe because it's been more than 3 years, your agency, the Salvation Army, was being considered as a new agency.
Okay.
And therefore, your score goal was only 70. And so the past grant effectiveness, that 10 points, you didn't have to score in. You got 0, but it didn't count against you because you didn't have to score in that one. And the same was true on the outcome score.
Okay.
So those...
So that clarifies that for me, so that's good. Okay, so I will let him know that. And then the other thing that we wanted to appeal, and I think he just wanted to see if we could bump up our points a couple. How do we measure rapid? And then how do we measure stable housing? Rapid is measured by not more than a week, but less than 2 days. And that's usually offered through our FSDS program, not so much our social services. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. And then stable housing would be no move to an alternate place of residence within 6 months. And those were 2 issues that we didn't get as many points on that happened. We were declined anyway, but he wanted me to appeal those points, see if it would bump us up some. Can you hear me okay?
We're having to work at it, but yes.
I'm trying to talk loud.
And we appreciate that.
I'll turn it up, but it's gonna ring if we turn it up.
Okay, I think we're doing all right.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I would ask, hi Shelley, I would ask about these questions. Did you have a chance during your filling the paperwork process out to contact United Way with these questions, our third-party contractor?
I don't recall having the opportunity. I mean, I didn't know I guess I could clarify that, but it was after we got the scores back. So going forward, I'll know the next time.
Okay.
I would like to commend Mike, though. I'm talking I've written a couple of these CDBG grants, but it seems like outcomes and outputs are an old terminology. Why can't we just call them goals and numbers? Do we have to go with outcomes and outputs?
Well, that's the technical terminology that's used in the business these days, but whatever we call them, what's important is that people are inside them. And so if you're, as I mentioned at the beginning, we didn't get copies of your comment sheets. And so if those comments from the reviewers, if you didn't even think it was a problem when you applied, of course you wouldn't have known. But if those comments from the reviewers gave some good guidance for next time, maybe that's the process working the way it should.
Okay.
And you did include your review sheets. Obviously, you just need to explain them if the reviewers just felt like you didn't give them enough information for them to score.
Yeah, so I guess that is the issue, and I think that's what Captain really wanted me to appeal on, just to see if we could get a few more numbers and boost our total number up. But I still don't even think if we boost it up, that it's going to still give us any funding, is my thought.
You got 44 out of 70 points, so it would be a pretty big stretch. It took getting 58 out of 70 to get funded.
Right.
Either 53 or 58. So it looks like you got a lot of, I'm impressed with the quality of the feedback that the committee gave you. It sounds like they really gave some pretty specific guidance for what they felt was missing.
Right, and it will help us, I think, going forward too, Karen.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us? I think you've covered the items that were in your, you mentioned that you've got partnerships that maybe you didn't, I think you got full credit for your partnerships.
Right, but when I went back and looked, I think I did get full credit, but it was an oversight on my part. I only submitted one letter from Catholic Charities, and I had several others that should have gone as well, but I think we're really okay with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure letters of support are required, correct?
No, it's
we had a
just
couple
listing.
of agencies that they're not really required. The issue is to use that application form to document what you have.
Okay, very good.
Brett, did you want to pitch in on any as our vendor here on these particular questions?
Sure, thank you, Chairwoman, for the opportunity to share here. Related to the comments on outcomes, the metric here on the score sheet is outcomes are clear and related to identified needs, and the question that the reviewers posed is the one that Shelley shared, which was how do you measure rapidly? So when we're talking about outcomes, those outcomes need to be specific. And when you use a term like rapidly without defining rapidly in the outcome, it makes the outcome a little squishy. And as a result, then it's difficult to understand how someone would measure then that outcome using, a word like rapidly without saying, and by rapidly we mean this. And so that was not included in the application. Shelley was able to include that in the appeal, but it wasn't in the application. And as a result, then the reviewers gave a reduced point value.
Thank you. So in the future, once the applications have come back, just to clarify, applicants are welcome to call you as the vendor to chat their way through those sorts of things as well, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Throughout the process, after the process, and beyond. As we have shared with Corey and with Rochelle, and we'll also be sharing with you as we move to another benchmark in this larger process. We have been collecting a series of recommended process improvements from the very beginning, and we've been collecting those and continue to collect those. And at certain points in time, we'll be able to share with the committee, but also with city staff, what those look like.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's absolutely part of our process, and this will be the first time we've been able to had an outside vendor to include in that process, and that'll be great. And thank you for your help on this one. Anything else, Brett or Shelley, on this one?
No, nothing more on my end. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Brett, for addressing that too.
Okay, consensus that we'll move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Shelley.
Next is Scent. Nikki Ramirez Jennings.
Good morning. So I just want to say on behalf of Scent, we want to thank the committee for the time to hear our appeal. After going back and reviewing our application, we are unable to provide clarification without bringing in information that was not originally submitted in the grant. We are not seasoned grant writers, but we're learning, and this has been a great learning curve, so we just want to be open and transparent. And I went ahead and jumped on to the appeal process just so I can learn and add even more to that learning curve. I want to also thank Brett, Juliet, and Joyce for helping us navigate through the process. And we're confident that when the grant is available again, that we'll be better prepared.
Awesome.
That's it.
Thank you and welcome. Scent is such an exciting program.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along. We have Topeka Lulac, Multipurpose Senior Center. Kathy. She's mute.
Oh, you're muted.
Okay.
Got it. Okay. Well, we appreciate the time and effort that went into the scoring of our application. I appealed this strictly on the basis of an inconsistency between the scoring sheet and the RFP. Under the organizational leadership capacity, the scoring sheet in the RFP was changed from the prior year, but the current year application question was not changed to reflect the changes on the scoring sheets. So last year's scoring sheet in the RFP said at least 15% is made of racial or ethnic minorities, is less than 70% of one gender, meets regularly over 65% attendance, and has a healthy mix of skills and resources. But this year's scoring sheet in the RFP said at least 20% is made of racial or ethnic minorities, is less than 70% of one gender, meets regularly with a quorum of board members in attendance at least 80% of the time. The average percent of board members attending the meeting in the last 12 months and how frequently does your board meet are asking two different things. It's a matter of 2 points, but it's important. Those 2 points are important for clarification in the years to come. One asks for the percentage of board attendance, and the other asks if there's a quorum of 80% of the time. So our board quorum is defined as a simple majority, and we achieved 100% of the time. But nowhere in the application is there a place to answer the question. So we included it with how frequent does your board meet question. If the intent of the question was for average attendance of the board meeting to be 80%, then the scoring sheet in the RFP should say meets regularly with over 80% attendance. Based on the scoring comments, it says we did not meet board attendance. So we're assuming that the scoring was based on the percentage of attendance at the board meetings rather than there being an 80% quorum at the meetings. The interpretation is not what the scoring sheet in the RFP says. So we think we really did achieve those 5 points. Granted, we got 3 of them. And once again, this is only a two little points. But it's important because there might be some discrepancy in this wording. And if that is the case, then those 2 additional points brings our score up to 91. So I think we really just need clarification. I was hesitant on doing an appeal for that. But once again, the clarification is what's important. So, did you catch all that?
The word that comes to mind is busted. You are so good and meticulous about that. Brett, vendor or staff, do you want to respond to that? Brett?
I can, yes, thank you, Chairwoman. I can respond and say that Kathy's interpretation of the reviewer's interpretation is correct, in that they were reading it in a way that indicated they did not meet that board attendance in their choice of answering it the way they did based on their, as Kathy mentioned in the appeal, question of what was actually being asked in the question. So I can tell you that the 3 points out of 5, as you know from the score sheet, there were a number of metrics for them to have met within organizational leadership, and the only one that was not met in their reading of what was scored here was board attendance. So I do think, as Kathy has brought up, that there is potential confusion in the language and also then in the interpretation. There was not discussion from any of the reviewers about that. None of the reviewers in this process asked us for clarification, which tells me that they had a clear understanding. From an applicant perspective, it looks like there may not have been that clarity in what was being asked.
I can see that if what they were doing was scoring off of the applications themselves and the scoring metric, that Kathy's pointing up something that, we worked so hard, that's the only thing we missed, I guess, right? Yeah. The issue would be, could this same confusion have affected some other scores as well?
And again, there wasn't any indication, there was no discussion in the from the reviewers at all about the interpretation of this. So their reading of it moved all the way through consistently among all applicants. So the issue would then be on the applicant side in terms of how it was that they were perceiving the question, and then what data from their board minutes they were putting into the application.
I guess what I'm thinking is it's not uncommon for a quorum requirement, and there were a couple of reasons why this committee changed that question or that standard. It's not uncommon for a quorum requirement to be 51%. And if our question asked 80%, then they would have all been scored in a similar way, just based on basically last year's standard rather than this year's. Is that right? Yeah, and again, I don't know that we can speak to last year transition to this year, but yes, it's possible that is the case. Kathy's right that we changed that standard. Mm-hmm. And that was a piece that we talked about in the RFP meeting. I think Mike brought it up in our RFP meeting
Topeka Metro about that change in organizational leadership, and we walked through that in the RFP. But in looking at our communication log that we kept through the application process, we didn't have questions about it. And then, as I said, the reviewers in their process also did not ask questions for clarification related to board attendance.
And the scoring was 80%, over 80% attendance. I assume that would be an average for the meetings all year long.
Yeah, as I'm reading this here, meets regularly with quorum of board members in attendance at least 80% of the time. So, yes, I'm guessing that the boards would have taken their board minutes, looked at attendance, and then run an average on whether or not they had a quorum of board members in attendance 80% of the time.
Well, so were we actually congruent then? Were we okay? Okay. So in Kathy, if we were congruent and we had it right, and there was just maybe a misunderstanding on LULAC's part then?
Yeah, possibly. Again, we didn't field any questions here, and so I've read through Kathy's appeal multiple times, and I think part of it is that at least where I'm coming from is I don't have experience with the prior as much to necessarily understand the transition from one to the other. It does, however, look like the language in this RFP includes that quorum number, whereas last year didn't. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, you are, Brett.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's possible that there was that's where the piece is, and that seems to be where the appeal is hinging on, indicating that board quorum defined as simple majority for LULAC was achieved 100% of the time. And Kathy's indicating that she didn't feel like she had a place to answer that on the application. So.
But if the application allowed her to demonstrate that they had a quorum at least 80% of the time, so was it a way that I'm going to need some help here anyway, the way that the question was answered?
I think as I'm looking at this now, and it's possible that there, moving forward, needs to be that clarification, especially when a change comes about like this. So for us, yeah. So for us, we in the RFP meeting, we walked through each of these and asked for questions. Didn't get any questions, but recognizing them when there's a change like this, defining quorum by saying that quorum can be defined by your organization, possibly, and then to say what we mean here is that you have a quorum in attendance at least 80% of the time based on average board attendance for your organization, whatever the frequency of your board meetings. That certainly could be a training piece moving forward.
I thought I had the application. I do, I'm sure, but.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just a thought. Listening to Brett, and his explanation that the reviewers looked through this and they didn't see that glitch or didn't have an issue with that. But as we talk about it and listen, I wonder if it's, and I don't mean to criticize the reviewers, it's just that when you do this all the time, maybe your understanding of it has become, I guess, clear for you and people who are working with you, but not subject to some other interpretation. I can see where there might be some of that. To Kathy's point about asking two different things, I like what Brett just said about maybe making it clear in future applications what specifically they're asking and how do they set the quorum, and have that opportunity to present that in the application. I do think that Kathy has a point. And as I understand it, they were granted an award, correct, Madam Chair?
Oh, yeah. This is $500 is what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And so I think I don't know that I would go for an appeal, but I certainly would ask that United Way and Brett take a look at that wording for future applications so that it's seen with different eyes. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking now at the application form and the scoring sheet, and the deal is and Kathy's explaining this in her letter, that the application just asks what % of your board members attended. It doesn't ask what your quorum was, so they can figure out whether that met or exceeded the quorum. So it's a change in how we ask the questions so that the scoring can be done consistently and accurately in the future. I'm concerned. I really appreciate that Kathy brought it up, and if that's the only thing we missed in this transition, that's not bad. If we did grant the appeal on this one, we'd have to go back and look at all of them. And I'm not sure that's, if we take it under advisement. Kathy, if I understood correctly, your point primarily was to bring this to our attention?
It was,
okay.
But it's also, I mean, we got knocked down 2 little points.
Right.
Granted, it's not going to make a difference on the money side of it so much as it is for the fact that it's clear, I guess. And it took some thinking afterwards when I got the scores and some research to figure that out. So
we need to fix it for sure.
Yeah.
Chair, I would agree that we definitely need to fix it. I also understand the conundrum of not wanting to set anything in stone with an appeal approval, because then you're having to go back and look at every single one. Is that right? Would that be correct?
Arguably. And a whole resubmission process and clarification.
Yeah, and I would say also if we were looking at thousands and thousands of dollars, that would definitely be an issue. I'll go with the consensus of what you two say. I think that it was important definitely for Kathy to spot this so it can be addressed. but I'll follow the wishes of how you two want to go on this, because like you said, Karen, if this is the only glitch that we've come up with in this whole transition, I think that the transition then has gone relatively smooth.
Thank you. As I scan the master sheet and look at the scores from the board participation, I'm guessing that it may have impacted quite a few of them, and in that way, probably pretty evenly. And therefore, because most people's quorums are 51%, and if everybody got knocked on the 80%, then it's going to go all the way down the line. It would affect our whole system for one thing, but it looks like it's been pretty evenly applied. So if the consensus is we're going to take it under advisement, but not change the scoring this year, is that where?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kathy. We'll do better.
You're welcome.
Okay. We've got two more. Next one is Topeka Center for Peace and Justice.
Yes, this is Glenda Du Bois, and our staff is here, our board chair is here, Edie Sneathen, and she is our grants committee chair, and also our staff who will respond to it. We definitely do thank you for the opportunity to appeal and for even the awarding of the funds that we have received. I'll turn it over to Edie, and she'll introduce the staff.
Okay. This is Edie Sneathen, and as Glenda mentioned, I'm president of the Topeka Center for Peace and Justice Board of Directors. We also have present today Lindsay Anderson and Barbara Ballantyne that are with us, and they're on our staff dealing with a lot of our programs and grants. We want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today. We initially received a notification that said we weren't granted it was a total denial of our grant application, so we filed the appeal process, or the appeal form, and then right before we sent it in, we got a second notification that said we'd been awarded $8,812, even though there's a $15,000 limit on the first-time applicants. And so we decided to continue the appeal just to see if we could collect the rest of that. I think a lot of our appeal has to do with the fact that we are first-time applicants for the City of Topeka Social Service Grant. And if you look at the various places where we received very low points, it's achieved, applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes on prior grants and past grant administration and so forth. And when we completed the application, the interpretation was that it was past grants from the City of Topeka. And so since this was our first application, we weren't able to provide any information on that. But as you will note in our appeal form, we have received many grants for our work in restorative justice and resolving conflicts within our community. And so I just wanted to kind of show that while we don't have experience with grant administration from the City of Topeka, we do with numerous. We've received federal grants, we've received state grants, we've received grants from the Topeka Rotary Club and various things. And so I'd like to kind of use some of the data from those projects to kind of clarify what was entered into the application and also into the appeal process. When the one we received 0 out of 20 points for applicant has achieved outputs and outcomes in prior grants per meaningful measures, again, we assumed that was from past City of Topeka grants, but in our appeal process, we submitted data that was compiled from our Rotary grant application in restorative justice and showed that when we do any project, we always use evidence-based practices. That's just part of our methodology. And so there is, in addition to administering the grant, we collect data from the services provided and look at the impacts that those have. And you can see from that appeal that we submitted, we had, in terms of conflict in schools, we had a 53% reduction and a 83% reduction in suspensions. When we're dealing with first-time juvenile offenders in mediation with the Department of Corrections, we had a significant reduction in recidivism rates. So we do measure that. It's just that we had not measured it under the format of a city grant. It was under federal grants and state grants and Rotary grants. So
I'm going to stop you just for a second, Edie, because similar to the earlier appeal that we discussed, as a first-time applicant, you only had to achieve 70 out of the 100 points. And the 20-pointer on achieving prior outcomes and the 10-pointer on past grant performance, you were not. Your reflection showed a 0 on it because you weren't scored on those.
Okay.
It was to do with the past city performance, and it sounds like that's not an uncommon confusion, I guess. I haven't been on the last few years since there was the split. Has that been a confusion before? No. Okay, and it may just be that it was the first time for you. You all did score 58 out of 70. And where you lost your points was lost a couple points on how you described your outcomes and outputs, and you just scored half on your demonstration that you had other resources available, and then the board and leadership points. Those were really all you lost points on.
Well, the board and leadership, we just wanted to highlight, and I think the same thing about that was just said about the attendance at board meetings, but just wanted to emphasize that our board members are very active in the community and very engaged in the process, not just attending board meetings, but that many of them lead various programs. We have Glenda Bauer and John Christensen that lead the Bridge program, which welcomes new immigrants into Topeka. Sharon Sullivan leads the STARS program that deals with human trafficking. So in addition to attending board meetings, our board members are very active in our programs. Lou Sadi is also here on this meeting today, and she's a member of our board, and she worked for Kansas Department of Health and Environment for many years writing grants, and so she and I are both on the grants committee. So we have many meetings a month. The board meetings are kind of just one little piece of the picture. We have a board member, Rebecca Morrissey, who's principal at Topeka High, and she's been instrumental in helping us to bring the restorative justice practices into the school system. So our board members are active in a lot of ways besides just attending a board meeting. Many of our board members are clergy, and so they help bring the communication of what we're doing with restorative justice throughout the community through their congregations.
What did your letter say your shortfall was on that one?
I'm sorry, what?
What did your letter advise you that the scoring was based on for that one?
It says comments didn't meet board attendance and female-male requirements.
Okay. I mean, they're interested in the qualifications, but there also are diversity requirements that the city puts on the boards, and so you may want to look at that again.
Well, and then the other one is I see, okay. Yeah. And just in terms of the community partnerships and that sort of thing, I want to emphasize as we move into the SAFE program, which is City of Topeka, Bill Cochran, Chief of Police, asked us to lead the task force that was assembled to deal with gun violence in Topeka. And so I think that those partnerships and community partnerships and so forth have been been recognized, even though we haven't had a past city grant. And even as we move forward now with the SAFE program, where we have received a Community Foundation grant and are moving forward with that, we have been designated as the lead agency. So I think that partnership and involvement with the community is an important aspect that we just wanted to emphasize in our appeal process.
Yeah, and you did score your full 5 points on that one.
So. Glenda, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I did just want to go back to the areas that Councilwoman Hiller mentioned that related to the board attendance and the process around that, just to clarify that there was some confusion on behalf of our grant writer in that regard. So looking at that, and then also the exact requirements as it relates to ethnic and gender, actually being able to be clear on that. So there was some, and I had just a brief conversation also with Brett about that. There was some confusion about what the expectations were. So that's why we did want to have that looked at again, because when we looked at it and reviewed it, we did think that there was some clarification that needed to be brought to the table on those questions.
Thank you, and I can tell you that the issues of diversity on the board have come up pretty much every time these committees have set the standards and reviewed annually, and from the city, the consensus has been and has remained that diversity on boards is very important.
Yes, and we
certainly have qualifications, but also ethnic and a balance of men and women. And so that can often be a hurdle when an agency is new and they weren't prepared for that requirement for their first grant. So it can take some time to ease into that. And it also can be a challenge, truthfully, when people aren't in control of the appointments to their own boards. It requires going to whoever the nominating parties are to make sure that those designated board members that come in will help that agency to meet that diversity goal. So that has come up before, but is something that, just for future reference, the city has stuck with over time. So we know it can sometimes take time to work into that. I've got a question overall for you all, and we will, this is another new thing for us this year. We did have a 10,000 minimum. We also had a 15,000 maximum for new agencies, new agency applications. And it appears that the decision was made that rather than rejecting applications that were over or under, our vendor this year chose to go ahead and consider them. One of the ways that works is that even if somebody doesn't get everything that they asked for, the award is somewhat close to can at least contribute to the program that they were proposing. In your case, you asked for $44,900, and with the ultimate scoring and award, you're being offered $8,812. My question is that, what are you going to be able to do with that? That $8,800 is also under our preferred 10,000 minimum, but is that enough money for you to do anything meaningful with for what you had proposed?
Yes, Karen?
Yeah.
This is Barbara. And I not only wrote the grant, but also managed the funds. And $8,800 goes a long ways towards this initiative in a number of things that we can do with it. One of the benefits of having a diverse budget is that you're able to find resources to complement resources. One of the key things about having funds from the city not only for the restorative practices, but for, which is a part of that whole SAVE initiative, is that it shows that you guys have skin in the game. So we can very much do very meaningful things with it. Will we be able to put together one of the positions? No. But can we pay our trainers? Yes. And that is a key part of what we need to do in terms of getting everyone educated to take these restorative practices, especially in neighborhoods where they're most needed. So absolutely, we can use the funds. I am sorry, I missed that whole bottom line. I just did not see that during that time, so my bad. But yes.
You lucky.
Make it. Huh?
You lucky.
Yeah, we actually weren't really clear on those, and once they were explained to us, we certainly did appreciate the different levels of applicants and the minimums and the maximums.
Okay, because it's only a $25,000 maximum for a returning agency.
Returning, yes, right. yes. So, and in my mind, having with other organizations, I guess I was even just thinking returning, so, but we're appreciative. If we would appreciate it if we could be considered for the minimum, but.
Well, we have the allocation process that we got back allocated 100% of the money, so we're going to need to figure out.
Okay.
Even very with good. Those 4 that are under 10, so we have to
very
figure
good.
that out.
That was
too.
part of our question also, so thank you for the explanation. Mm-hmm. And for the consideration.
Absolutely, and you're doing great work, so it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you want a consensus
Committee?
on this one? Or
Yes.
Again, I think that they're doing good work, good application. First time around, they got lucky.
Everybody hear that?
Yeah. So
we've been first time arounders enough to know what he said, even if we didn't hear him very well.
Okay. Councilwoman Valdivia?
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will move to our last one, which is Soul Reason, who is here in the house.
In the house.
So we will have the grant writer, it looks like, moving up here.
Can I take my mask off? Or
Yes,
no? Okay.
I think so.
All right, cool. 6 feet. I'll go this way.
It's ideally 10, so maybe we should next time move the podium a little farther away.
All right, so hi, I'm Crystal Wiltz. I'm the board president for Soul Reason. Although I did not write this grant, I'm very familiar with this process. I've been writing grants for this for about 4.5 years. So our appeal comes from the question regarding capacity. So the question says the organization sources to produce outcomes effectively and efficiently. So a couple of comments that we got was there was no budget history. Well, there is no budget history because we haven't had a city grant before, but we do have an agency budget history as we've been in existence for 4.5 years, and you can read that earlier in the grant. The second comment was budget is only going to salary. Yes, it is. As you can read in the RFP, that is an eligible expense for this funding. And lastly, it says program may only be sustained by city grant funding, may need to address sustainability of the program. If you look at the rubric, it says the history of effective program management. It does not say the future. So there's nowhere in the rubric where it speaks to sustainability. If we do get those 10 points, we would get a 90 and we would be funded.
I'm going to lean to Brent. Can you help us a little bit with this?
Yes, thank you. So on the appeal, Kara, thanks for the opportunity to share here. Let me pull up here. So yes, on the comments related to the organization has the resources to produce those outcomes efficiently and effectively. as was shared, there was no budget history given, and that's one of the things that the reviewers looked at here in order to be able to score this piece. Obviously, they looked at other areas as well. They did mention that the budget is only going to salary, and so that was all they mentioned there. They are aware of the fact that the RFP does allow $4 to go to salary, but that was a comment that they had on this particular application. They also suggested, based on the dollars that were recorded in here, that there were potential sustainability pieces. So program may only be sustained by the city grant and may need to address sustainability of the program. So those were the comments that were given here on the 10-point piece related to organizational ability to produce the outcomes.
I was confused.
I believe those are the only comments that we have here.
And I did not pull up the rest of the application on this one. Was there a proposal that there would be, that this budget increase would improve the ability to achieve outcomes, that there would be higher outputs, anything like that?
I don't have their application in front of me, so that's not a question I can answer for you. We can certainly pull it up and take a look at that.
I do know that on the budget that they had, as you pointed out, there wasn't, everything on there was new and without history of any of those other sources as well. It also totaled, maybe I just couldn't follow it well enough, totaled 39,000 from 0 and 0. And then somehow the total agency budget later became 55,000.
Right, because one is a program budget and one is an agency budget.
Got it.
You ask for a program budget and then you ask for an agency budget.
Okay.
That's the difference.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry, Chair, what she just said.
Oh, I'm sorry. One is an agency budget and one is a program budget. So in the RFP, you ask for a program budget specific to what you are funding, and then you ask for an agency budget, which is overall agency. That's the difference in the amount.
Thank you.
But I do see that what the reviewers were looking at was no budget history at all for this particular program. No prior.
Prior with the city or prior just with us?
It doesn't show any. I mean, this chart shows multiple funding sources.
Right, this is the chart that's in EC Impact, and this is asking for dollars from, so we haven't had the city grant before. So that's why we didn't put anything in 2019 and 2020.
Of course, but there isn't
anything else either?
Anything else either.
Okay.
If I remember in the last year when we sent this in, I had contacted, I think, Corey and asked if we needed to put any history, and she said no. Is that correct? Were we supposed to put?
I don't recall that conversation whatsoever.
But isn't this just for this grant, not for your entire past history on your budget?
You could see on this actual question, there's multiple different grant funding sources that.
But that's why we did it. And there may be an email I have, and I don't know if it wasn't. If you don't recall, then maybe it wasn't you. But they had said no. This is just for our grant. If you didn't have anything, you don't put anything in. So this year I thought, okay, I'm not going to put it in.
And you didn't check with United Way staff on that issue?
No, they already told me no.
Okay.
We can find the email, send it to you, if you would like.
There's an email.
Okay. That would be important because this is here to get an idea of what other funding sources are available and what the history is of the programs as far as from the committee's point of view.
Even still, you take, I don't know. If you take out the history, it would still give us a 5 and we would still get funding. So.
There were issues that the committee had also with clarity of the outcomes and identifying outcomes.
Yep, totally accept that one.
Uh-huh, okay.
And Karen, Chair, also you were saying, or maybe Brent was saying, that there were concerns by the reviewers on budget only going to salaries. Is that correct? Even though salaries are allowed, but there were some additional comments made by reviewers. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. There were comments related to the ask going to salaries. I think in part when you're looking at a number of grants and a number of applications, and you're looking at those together, and reviewers are looking at that. I think there are things that they're taking into account, and that would have certainly been one here on this application as they shared those comments during the score process.
I can tell you the last 4 times I've written this grant, it's always been for salaries only, at a higher amount than $15,000.
And have you gotten those awards?
We've never, yeah, we've gotten the awards at 100% before, and we've never gotten the comment that it's just going to salaries.
Is that for the Sole Reason Foundation?
No, that's for Boys and Girls Clubs of Topeka.
I can only speak to the Sole Reason Foundation application.
Agreed. I'm talking about past grant history.
Yeah, I'm just explaining here that the comments are for the Sole Reason Foundation and the application submitted here.
I'm confused. Are we talking about the Boys and Girls Clubs, or are we talking about Sole Reasons?
Sole Reason.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yep.
Brett, if I may, Madam Chair? Just a quick question to address the issue of salaries. It's an allowable expense, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Within the RFP, there are those things that are allowed to be covered with the city funding, and salaries are part of that, yes.
Okay, and then if I correct, your follow-up was that there were some comments or there was some discussion by the reviewers about the fact that this request was solely for salaries. Is that correct?
Yes, so there are comments related to outcomes are clear and related to identified needs, where the score was 5 out of 10 points. There was conversation there about budget going only to salary and about that outcome being more of an eligibility requirement. Then in the comments that were here, it appeared in the comments with the reviewers that it looks like the salary piece came up a couple of times. Within that, organization has the resources to produce outcomes efficiently and effectively, so it was more than one reviewer.
Okay. So in my mind, I'm trying to get clear. While it's an allowable expense, the reviewers probably put it as a lower priority than the other services that an agency or organization would provide rather than giving the money toward a salary? I'm not trying to.
That's one interpretation.
Yeah.
I don't know that that was clearly expressed.
Okay. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or theirs, but if that's an understanding that the reviewers hold, that if you come to me with an application and it's solely for salaries, it's going to already start off in a position that might not get as much consideration compared to those that provide services or goods or whatever. And I just want to get that clear in my head. But again, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or theirs. I'm just trying to understand that.
Sure. I would also note that budget going only to salary is one of the 4 comments on this section. The other one was related to no budget history. The program may only be sustained by city grant funding, and they may need to address sustainability of the program.
Okay, thank you, Brent.
Yes, thank you.
I do have the email about the history. So we asked the question on March 5th to Rochelle. Since I haven't received any funding from the city, am I correct in assuming I don't complete any questions for 2018, 2019, just 2020? Yes, you're correct. 2018, 0, 2019, 0, 2020 requested amount.
Let's put this as being just on the dollar amount on that one little section.
It says complete, I don't complete any questions for 2018, 2019, and 2020.
You were assuming that it was that block that's on the front page?
Yeah, just where I asked about
Funding from the city?
Yeah, not the budget, because you have to have a program budget.
Okay. How did you ask your question?
Since I haven't received any funding from the city, am I correct in assuming that I don't complete any questions for 2018, 2019, just 2020?
Again, because I would have thought that the United Way would have explained that when they had their workshop, especially on that budget page, which they have to have a program budget.
Let me add too, on our last year's application, we were not marked down for that at all. No one said anything about, we didn't have any numbers in the budget. Except for that year.
I don't know about last year's application in terms of whether you had program history at that point.
We did. We've been around for 4.5 years. So we've had history for the last 4.5 years.
Again, we've shifted to make sure this was, as clear as it could be.
Chair?
Yes.
Okay, since being around for 4.5 years, so, and forgive me if this has already been asked and answered, how many applications have you filled out with the city for grant funding?
For sole reason, 2.
2, and your prior award amount?
We didn't get awarded last year.
Okay. Were you asking for salary amount at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you recall what your score was on your budget section?
You know what? I don't think it was.
I don't recall. I didn't write it. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back and look.
And
I don't know what the score was either.
I mean, it's possible that you didn't get the scoring for resources last year?
No.
What?
I don't think it was the same. I don't think we did salary.
Well, I mean, there were a number of issues here. One was the salary only. One was the issue of displaying any prior funding. I mean, sometimes agencies will come to the city for their first ever funding, and they might have been in existence for, I mean, maybe Sole Reason, in fact, has been operating with volunteers instead of salaried people and now wants to do salary, I'm not quite sure. So that's not out of the realm of possibility, but it would make sense for particularly if the outcomes were a little weak, for a reviewer to maybe mention the salary part, just in terms of how sound the application overall was looking. Can't go too far from that, just looking at the scores, however, but with no evidence of prior funding for any of the programming. I mean, that's obviously part of the story. The reason it's in there is to determine, you know, whether the organization has had any grants before, even if we've only asked for performance history on the city ones. And so therefore the likelihood that the organization would have come up with these other, you know, other money besides what's requested from the city to fill up a budget. All those are reasonable questions, and it sounds like contributed to the concerns of the committee.
I agree, Mayor.
Pardon?
I agree with what you're bringing up.
I'm only looking at this one. I don't know what it looked like last year.
So, Madam Chair, where do we go from here?
Well, I need to hear from you all whether, I mean, we've heard that one email that was apparently misinterpreted on, was March before we had a vendor?
No, we should not have responded. We should have referred that question to the vendor, and we won't do that again.
That's what I'm thinking.
I didn't hear that.
I replied that that question should have been reported and told to go to the vendor and not city staff, and that won't happen in the future.
It should have gone to them, and it did not go to them?
It came to us, was answered and interpreted by us, which they received a different interpretation, but the question should have went to the vendor, and we will make sure that that doesn't happen in the future.
So let me just get this straight. Since I am by Zoom, slow in the uptake, that was not communicated to the United Way. It happened before that. And is that correct?
What I heard was that United Way was already selected as our vendor, and the question should have been referred to them and was instead handled at the city level. So there was an error made.
Rochelle did not forward that to our third-party administrator?
Correct.
Well, this is my thought. I mean, I think that if there is due diligence, if we drop the ball in some capacity, we're going to definitely have to deal with that. Definitely have to deal with that. The other issue I have, though, is I have limited grant experience, but I have some grant experience. Not to the level that, you know, probably you and Mike do, but I kind of cringe at times when I see a grant that is going just for salaries, especially, you know, but that's just me. So I think this is a definite conundrum we're in. So who's going to take the lead on how we handle it?
I think, if I may, if you're concerned about a grant going all to salaries, then I would just request that you put that in the RFP, that's not okay. Because if you read it as a grant writer and it says that you can ask for all salaries, then we're going to assume that it's okay and we're going to write for that.
Right, but let me just say, I'm not the reviewer.
Yeah, understood. Understood.
Let's understand that.
Let me ask a question. If you had filled out the 2019 and 2020 columns, what would we have seen?
For all categories or just salaries?
All categories and salaries.
So, yeah, so we just started paying our CEO this year. He never got paid before, so it's been all volunteer basis. But we do write other grants. We've received multiple grants, probably $20,000 worth the last couple years. And our salaries that we're paying him now just come from individual contributions and other grants.
So you've got a $39,000 budget for 2021. And so when you say you've raised about $20,000, is that?
That's just in grants. So then we also have special events. So it looks pretty similar to 2021. So we have grants, special events, individual donations on the revenue side.
So you had $20,000 in grants each of those prior years?
Yes, around that amount.
And 1,500 in donations each of those prior years, and 3,000 in special events each of those prior years?
Yes.
So where were those other two grants from, the big ones?
There's not another two. We get from Advisors Excel to the Topeka Community Foundation, 2030 Club. We got a large grant from them. We've gotten that 2030 Club grant the last 2 years. Advisors Excel the last 2 years. Topeka Community Foundation the last 2 years, I believe, as well. And there's others, I just can't remember them off the top of my head. And then we have a golf tournament each year that brings in roughly $3,000 to $5,000. Usually held in May, but this year it'll be in September.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, we give away over 800 shoes a year with our CEO doing the majority of the work, and he's done it free for 3 years. And we decided that we needed to pay him this year for all of his work since we were continuing to get grants, partnering with more agencies. That's why it's really focused on salaries. There's not, as you might know, there's not a lot of people who will grant money for salaries. So a lot of the grants that we get are for shoes. So when we see a grant with salaries, we take advantage of that if it's allowable.
So, they didn't have enough information to get that far, but what you're talking about is then oops, I bet I would have a better time doing the math on the calculator instead of my phone. So, oops. So you're talking about $40,000 a year expense to give out 800 pairs of shoes.
For the outcome for this grant is $650.
650 pairs of shoes?
Yes, for this specific program.
All right, so that would mean that you're talking about $40,000 a year and giving out 650 pairs of shoes, which is $61 per pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm. But all that goes into that is, I mean, it kind of depends on So we get shoe requests from many different people. If you look at our application, you'll see all of our partners. So the school can give us a call and say, hey, I have this kid that needs these shoes. We have to go to a warehouse, we have to get the shoes, and we have to take the school that one pair of shoes for that one kid. That could happen at 7 schools on one day. We also give shoes to foster kids through Family Service and Guidance with communities and schools, Pathways, Salvation Army. We're talking now about a partnership with KVC. We go to the Boys and Girls Club twice a year where we usually give out more than 250 pairs of shoes there. And that takes all day in a truck to get all of the shoes there, set it up. We're there all day with the kids to pick them out. USD 501 is our largest community partner. Like I said, we could go to 7, 8 schools every day taking shoes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the program is wonderful. I know that my Rotary Club gives out about that many, then it's just the shoes.
Yeah, we also have to go purchase the shoes. We also have to store them somewhere. It is our biggest program. I mean, that's what we do. We give out shoes to kids in need. So it is going to be the majority of our budget for all of us to get that done. And when you think about it, it's been done on a volunteer basis for 3 years. And we're just getting larger.
Well, I am not comfortable with us making a decision on a revised application ourselves at all. If there was to be a review, it would need to go back to the committee. The issue for us is that we had an incomplete application and scoring corresponding to that, but there apparently was a miscommunication. So this committee needs to look at whether that email is enough reason to reconsider or not.
Chair, I think it may be enough to reconsider. However, I think that we have to be very, well, I don't know if we can even be very, just because it's getting sent back, it still has to be based with all the information on its merits and making sure it passes the same criteria that what we're asking for other applicants. I do believe there was a failure on our part, on the city's part, to get that email to the United Way. That was the mess up. And so I do not believe that it would be fair for our labs to hit them this hard. However, we also have to have the understanding that once they put the full application in, it still has to go through the process and you know, graded as such, reviewed as such. That would be my suggestion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
To address that issue, one of the things that I would be wondering, and maybe Brett probably can't answer it immediately, is that if it would have been filled out differently with the information that has been brought forward, would it have made a difference?
Please go ahead, Brett's on.
Yeah.
See.
Would it have made a difference, Brett, if that information would have been added in the application? Because like you said, there were other things in there that the review committee took into consideration. And while it might have given them more information, would it have made any difference in the decision reached by the reviewers?
Thank you for the question. Again, as I'm looking at the notes that were taken related to the application from the reviewers, is this the question? Are you asking related to the lack of budget history information?
Yes, because that's where we're talking about the email that said you had to didn't need to put anything in 2018 and 19. But had they put something in 2018 and 19, and the reviewers saw that information, would it have made a difference in their final review?
Yeah, there were other issues in the application that I mentioned. I would not want to speak for reviewers here.
I agree with that, Brett. They reviewed
35 applications. If you take a look at the number of metrics here, those are thousands of metrics that they went through. I don't know that I could pinpoint that particular conversation on this particular metric for this particular application and be able to speak for reviewers. I think that puts us beyond our role in the process, even though we are the vendor. The scores and the scoring were done by reviewers who met and exceeded the requirements given by the Social Services Grants Committee. So I don't know. I would not feel comfortable speaking for the reviewers.
I appreciate that, Brett. I just wanted to ask the question because if we're going to go through the whole process of reconsideration but end up in the same place, I don't see the purpose in that.
Chair?
Yes.
I would have to agree with Brett. I just don't think that, I understand Mike's question, but that would be putting him in a bad spot that he certainly doesn't need to be in. And I think that if we take up and show our due diligence with understanding where the failure went in our process, because that's what we were committed to doing, right? Is make this process more accountable, more transparent. Doesn't mean everybody's going to get what they want, and we have to stick with certain criteria. But if we drop the ball, then I believe that we should give them that chance, but it would have to be specific only to what that email stated and did not get communicated. So the budget information, and then have it go before the reviewers, because it's going to have to fly on its full merits. And with those reviewers, I have enough confidence in them that with the information that they're going to see everything and then go from there. And then we can say we've done our due diligence, we've listened, we have taken our responsibility up on this because we want to make this program better and more accountable and transparent.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we're working this first time with the kind of the three-way communication, but if there was an honest misunderstanding and an error on our part, Brett, if we wanted to give this agency an opportunity to submit the 2018 and 2019 information and have the committee reconsider that question only. I don't know, I want to limit them totally if they had, that caused them to reevaluate. I mean, they don't, it's not just a one question to one question. They might have some other evaluations, but basically focus on that section. Hopefully that could be done remotely rather than taking a lot of time or a meeting. Brett, would it be, I don't know if it's within our engagement to have that committee take a second look at an application? If
we haven't had that happen before, but
right,
I'm sure United Way can respond to the availability of the review team.
Yes, thank you. Chairwoman, let me respond in two ways. First, let me just come back to the communication piece quickly and remind both the committee and all of the applicants that United Way of Greater Topeka was listed as the contact for the application. And we have, as I sent to Corey, as you will have access to as well, a very extensive communications log where we took every communication that we had from agencies, put it in a spreadsheet, and showed how it was that we responded to all of the questions. So I just want to make that clear that we were listed as the contact. That said, let me also say that we, in looking at other applications, that we did have other applicants who were first time, who did fill out the budget section. So I wanted to let the committee know that. I don't know what that process would look like. That in the history of our work at United Way has never happened. That would be something that appears from Corey that hasn't happened either. So I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not sure, for example, if the reviewers are available. They were available for a limited time. I don't know what the turnaround would be like for you. So
If we could back up for a moment then. Thank you so much for this response. There was an orientation for this process, correct?
yes, that is correct. We did that over Zoom. We did that, and then we also listed that PowerPoint and all of the resources in the resources section of EC Impact for all of the applicants.
And was the orientation mandatory or optional?
It was not optional, or sorry, it was not mandatory.
It was optional. Sole Reason, did you attend the orientation?
Yes.
You did attend
Yes,
it.
we did.
So you got a chance, and did you review the application in that orientation?
Yes, we walked through the RFP, and we walked through the scoring sheet in particular, and talked through those pieces, yes.
Okay, and the only resource that was listed on the application to call for clarifications was United Way?
Correct. In the RFP, we are listed, and different individuals are listed based on what is needed. I am listed as a contact, Juliette McDiffett is listed as a contact, and Joyce Kotzer is also listed as a contact.
That changes things.
Yes, it does.
Was that email this year?
For me.
Okay.
So the email that she sent and we received a response for was last year. It was 2019, so therefore we didn't think it needed to be in 2020 because 2019 we received that answer. Apologies.
Can you say that again? I missed that.
Sure. Yep. The email that we sent was sent in 2019, and the answer was given in 2019 when the city had that grant. Since it went to a third party, we didn't ask the question again because we didn't think it had changed. Because that's the response we got in 2019, which is what we put in our grant in 2019. That's my fault.
I thought the email was in 2020.
As did I. That's my fault.
Sorry. Yeah, I would, this is why I shouldn't talk at meeting.
You're fine.
I don't know the young woman's name. I would just say I just can't. I would have to backtrack on that. Backtrack's a bad word, but I thought we were looking at 2020. And, we knew that we were going through, and our agencies that work with us, knew we were going through a third party. The new training, all of that.
Okay, so take the budget history out. That's fine. But if you look at the other two comments, we got 0 points. If you look at the other two comments, going to salary, it's not an issue in the RFP. It said that we could. And sustainability, the rubric does not have sustainability in the question, in the point scale. It has history, not future. So I don't understand how we could get graded down for sustainability and salary. The history, that's fine. If we were supposed to ask the question at the meeting and we didn't understand, I'll own that. But as far as the other two comments where we got 0 points, that's a concern to me.
Karen, I'm going to move back to you on that. Let's talk. Tell me your thoughts.
I think overall, that if we go back to respecting the comments and observations of the review team, there are lots of things that can be discussed, but they're, lessons to learn for the future. They seemed reasonable based on what we got. Mike?
Well, I think everyone's made their best effort with the understanding that they had at the time when they were filling things out. But I get back to, if the details were given in the orientation and it was made clear, then who the contact was, then that's where information should have been sent to. I don't want to say that there was a failure on our part. Maybe we could have said, check with United Way, but even then, this is in 2019, so it's not really relevant. So I'm in the position right now, for me, that I would not approve an appeal right now.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
I would have to agree, and just saying to Corey and Rochelle, I apologize if I'm not trying to be hard on you guys. I thought it was 2020. I would just hope that, anything that comes your way in as we transition over to this, that, that you guys would push everything over to where it needs to go, reference them to the United Way. We know now that it was 2019. I'm not trying to bag on you guys, because I think, you guys have done really well with this transition.
Thank you, Councilmember Valdivia Alcala. I will say that we received several questions and directed them all until this one, I thought, which I was confused about. We directed them all to United Way, so thank you for that.
But I know I have to hold myself accountable when I'm putting stuff out there that doesn't need to be out there. So my apologies to you guys, and Soul Reasons, I'm sorry. I mean, I could really see it with the email if this would have been in 2020, but I have to agree with the other two on my committee.
And I respect your decision. I would just say that you ask us to come to you with an appeal based on what's in the RFP and what we put in our application. And you said it was okay for us to ask for salaries, and we did that. And there is not a question about sustainability, and you held that against us, that the review board didn't feel like we were sustainable. So I would just say that you're not holding true to what you ask as an appeal, because we're bringing you things that aren't in the rubric or in the application that we wrote on there, and we're getting dinged for that. So I just want to bring that up, that I don't feel like the budget history I own, totally understand that, but as far as the other comments with salary and sustainability, I don't think it's in there. I don't see it.
I think they're probably related in that, without the evidence of again, I'm reading into what they said, but if there isn't evidence that there's been that diversity, other funding before, to have, they were probably all related.
So when it said, what are you asking for? And we said salary, they're saying no, even though the RFP says yes?
Yep. And we can't read into that totally, but understanding how that works and why it's important is probably worth making sure, when it operated and gave out all those shoes without a salary. And of course, you didn't have the budget history to show that you had paid it before, so they couldn't see that.
That shouldn't matter. It says you can ask for salaries only
So
in the RFP.
ask for salaries.
Okay. I would suggest working with United Way further on it. The issue is because they had no information, they had to try and draw some assumptions.
But we did not go over budget you said, in the, what's it called?
Appeal?
No, when we went to the training, they didn't go over the budget.
Orientation.
Yeah. So unless I would have thought, I need to ask questions on everything because it might have changed.
Well,
That's okay, but I think it's really wrong that it says, you can ask for salaries, we ask for salaries. Sorry, you ask for salaries, you don't get points. That doesn't make any sense.
Especially if we got a 0 out of 10. I mean, if we got a 5, we'd get funded. Even if we forgot the funding history and we got a 5, we would still get funded. So just.
That's crazy.
Final thoughts. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Since we've discussed these, I think, to some extent, and for the most part have a consensus.
I think she can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear? Is that it? Oh.
Yeah.
Get closer to your mic, Mike.
Mike. Anyway, and you had talked about maybe being tentative in our decision and then coming back at yet another time. I don't know that for me that's necessary.
I didn't mean another meeting. I just meant now that we're through all 6 of them.
Yeah, okay.
If on each of those 6 today, the sense was that we would appreciate the communication and the contact, but not recommend any of the appeals, then we can just affirm that now that we're done. Nobody on the committee wants to reconsider any of those, then we are done with that. We also need to address the issue of whether these 4 that came out of the committee that are under 10,000, there was some perhaps misunderstanding on United Way's part this time that the 10,000 was a minimum ask, but not the minimum grant. So for this time, and then of course we'll consider for future, do we want to go ahead and recommend this list forward with the 4 that are under 10,000? If we didn't want to do that, we would have to recalibrate I'm not sure what we would do, actually.
Madam Chair, like I said,
Yes.
like you were saying, if we considered those less than 10,000 to not grant those.
Correct.
Then that would redistribute that money to those who had applied for grants? How would that work? Or
It would not. We'd end up amongst those 4 going with the scores. The way our system is set up, somebody applies for the grant, then based on their scores, if they hit the threshold, then their grant is calculated based on their score.
Okay.
So
would we have funds left over then, not distributed?
the way our format is, yes, we would. Or we would have to internally recommend some better way to calibrate that.
Well, I don't know. I would maybe look to Corey in this sense, is that I know that they established that $10,000 as a minimum, and it seemed to work well. Reducing the award below 10,000, will that harm our efforts for the coming year in granting the awards?
Councilmember, I honestly think that United Way's interpretation makes total sense, just a little different than what we have done in the past. I think for this year, leave it like it is. The wards are close to 10,000. They're not too far down there.
Yeah, they're not 2,000 or anything like that.
My opinion, if you're asking, it would be just to leave the recommendation as is.
Well, thank you, Corey, and I tend to agree because I know that this is the first time around with this system, and anticipated there'll be some glitches, but these aren't hurtful glitches in a sense.
Yeah.
In the sense that some people who probably would have not received an award because they were under 10,000 are going to get some award, and that'll help their agencies and their requests. That would be my recommendation, is to follow Corey's advice, to leave it as it stands. And if you're ready for a motion to proceed, I would make a motion that, having listened to the appeals and taking into consideration all those things that have been highlighted and pointed out to us, that where we can make some maybe procedural changes, or I would recommend that we not uphold any of the appeals and accept the report as is.
Yeah, okay, the recommendation has been to recommend forward to the council the allocation recommendations as they came to us.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
Because I'm still having some problems hearing. So the $10,000 was our understanding, the city is that $10,000 and not to go less than that. So we have 4 agencies that went below $10,000 because of the boring went down with them. But where was the misunderstanding at here? I'm sorry. Was it the United Way didn't understand that 10,000 would be 10,000? Is that it?
I can speak to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the RFP, in the area where they're talking about, where we're talking about minimums and maximums, under social services grant detail, we read those as the minimum request is 10,000, the maximum request is 25,000. New and untested programs, the maximum request is 15,000. So our interpretation was that those were related to requests and not to final grant amounts.
And that may actually make sense long-term as we consider it in the because we can't manage what those percentages are going to be and how the math is going to work, which is, I think, why that's happened before. Just want to make sure we addressed it.
No, thank you for the chance to share that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So it wasn't an issue. This outcome wouldn't have been any different. Is that what we're saying?
This has happened before, let's put it that way. And so it's a matter of the wording that we had in our priority sheet that said that grants wouldn't be under 10,000, yet realistically, these are close, as Corey says. And as Councilman Padilla pointed out, if we didn't do that, we would end up with that money left over, or that's one.
So what the money would be left over, and how many thousands of dollars is that? A couple of $1,000, 3,000, what?
35, 30, 36. It's because these are just percentages under 10,000 is how the awards came out based on the math.
Right. I don't have a good feel with it, so I'm going to say,
What we need is a second to Councilman Padilla's motion if you're ready to go with this chart as proposed.
Yeah, but didn't I have a right to ask a question?
Absolutely.
Under discussion, yes.
I was trying to get my question out before he started making the motion.
Well, that's all right. We're just trying to wrap it up.
Okay, but I have concerns.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm saying is that was it. I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence as with our third-party administrator and with the city to make sure that there was no glitches in this that prevented them, that was on our part, that prevented them from getting the full $10,000. That's what I'm saying. That's what my question is.
There is, our priority sheet says that you get scored, and that then based on the scoring and the dollars available, that whatever your percent is on that score is applied to your request, and that's how much your grant would be. And that's how those 9,700 and 8,813 and so on were arrived at, was using the formula that was council adopted in that in that RFP. There's just an inherent conflict between us having on that form that the grants would be a minimum of 10,000, but then if you use that math, obviously if somebody applied for 10,000, it's likely to be a little under.
Okay. So does that mean that in the future, we will have to clarify that more or get some different verbiage instead of what we're currently using, is my question.
One solution to that would be to change that language only slightly on the priorities sheet and have it say that the application shall be for no less than 10. That'll solve it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I will second your motion, Mike.
Thank you.
It's been moved and seconded to recommend forward to the council the recommendations from our vendor as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Decided. Okay. With that, we are done with this process. We will then send a recommendation forward. Corey, do you know when that would go to council? Probably the first week of August.
I apologize, I don't have the agenda calendar with me today, but that sounds about right.
Well, it needs to go sometime in the next few weeks, just so that they have it in time to affirm that the number that we're recommending, the full number that the council is considering in the budget, and so that they correspondingly make sure they leave it there, so that this whole thing is final then for the benefit of everybody watching after the council does its final approval on the 2021 budget. With that, in terms of our next meeting, this body had decided to do a deep dive into aging services in the community. And at this point, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got us set for a meeting on the 5th of August? Yes, ma'am. And was the intent that that would be the meeting where we work this, or that that was a planning meeting? Help me remember.
I believe that was the one that we were hoping to have those agencies at the table.
Okay.
Have that discussion.
We had to, as we worked on meeting dates for the committee, we debated a little bit. We weren't sure how the appeal process would go and just kind of where we would be, whether we want to have that focus session on aging services only, just move straight into that, or whether we want to wait till the city's budget process is over.
For my part, I'd like to wait until the city budget process is over and give us some time to let the agencies who provide aging services get their information together, be complete in their presentation, so that when we do get them in here, we can move forward and not have to yet come back one more time. That's just my preference.
Councilwoman, any thoughts on your part?
Yeah, I would agree with Mike, and also I think we need to remember to bring up the issue where it has about Latino being considered under the white category, because you remember how we were talking, we have that Latino and on many other census, any other documents that you fill out where it asks race, ethnicity, or whatever, it has that option for Latino, it has the option for indigenous, it has, sometimes you even see it for Chicano, but usually that's in the Southwest. So I think we also said we were going to be looking at that.
Yeah, now that would be part of we really have two tasks ahead of us. We have one where we decided to ourselves do some focus just on senior services. And the idea was we would do that before, sometime between the appeals process and the and our review of the whole process for recommendations for 2022. So if we, and the issue of how that chart is calibrated would be part of that overall grant process review. If we want to wait till September, and this has been pretty intense, so I wouldn't mind just having a little break. So we have wanted to make sure we finished everything before the end of the year also, because that is, committees in the past have strayed over, which has really pushed the time frame. So if we plan to have the meeting on the aging services in September, and perhaps some communication pretty soon about how we would handle that, just so we're sure we're prepared, and then do our overall process review in October and November. You think that will work?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And these Wednesday mornings at 10 are good?
Yeah.
All right. With that, we'll plan not to meet in August, but get with Liz and get at least 3 meetings set. We already have them set for September and October, don't we? Tentatively, anyway?
I think tentatively.
All right. Well, we'll get back with you. We do have some information already, thanks to JAAA, on a listing of all the different aging services. We've also already asked staff, based on some conversations we had earlier, to go through our grantee list, and that does have a demographic in it about the age of the clients. So we pull anybody that we're funding, just invite them to the table on those conversations as well. Did I understand that correctly from our conversations before? Mm-hmm. Our funded agencies, and then the whole pool of agencies that are aging focused? Okay. Well, we will start from there then, and thank you all that are still with us and that participated earlier. Thanks for this whole process. This is the hardest part, I think, but everybody's been great. And again, so grateful to have had the positive response on how the customer service and training went up until this point. Thank you for our staff on this end, helping us bridge this transition. We will talk again in September. Thank you.
Thanks, agencies. Thanks,
Thank you.
United
I
Way.
got a 1 o'clock
Thanks, city
Zoom.
staff. See y'all.
I got a 1 o'clock Zoom on the census I gotta get.
Oh my gosh. Well, I got my census sign in my front yard.
Good.
Last meeting.
I got mine. My guess is my front yard's gonna get pretty full this time.